At its elective conference last year, the ANC resolved to introduce 5 new areas of taxation for South Africans. One of these was a graduate tax, which has been criticised for its potential to discourage tertiary studies and cause a mass exodus of South African graduates. Warren Martin, who's Director of Corporate Tax at Grant Thornton, and Dani Ungere, who's a spokesperson at AfriForum Youth, join us now for more detail on this. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Well, at this stage, we've got the said tax being a consideration, but the expectation is that it will be made a reality. First and foremost, Warren, let's get your take on this. Where do you stand on the proposal?
Hi, Alicia. I think from a basis of, we spoke about this early in February, it was something that came up very suddenly. There was all this talk about a free education model in 2014. We've moved on 2 months from there. The 2013-2014 budget has come through, and there actually has been no speak of it. It's actually been very quiet. Most of those 5 things that we spoke about that related to Mangaung, very few of them have actually come through. So what are we going to see going through 2014 free education? I don't see it happening. This is something that's going to have to come through next year. Will the government put a proposal through in an election year? That I'm not so certain of. My view is it is a way that we have to move to. We have to look at considerations. How do we finance this kind of a model? I just don't see it happening in the next sort of year period.
Dani, Lindsay in Cape Town. I mean, the ANC's Mangaung conference, it says here, suggested 5 areas of future taxation, including progressive and redistributive taxation. This is surely regressive for the long term. I mean, to tax graduates, for goodness sake, we want to encourage people to go to tertiary education, to become qualified, to serve this country. But to tax them is quite extraordinary. Tax them when they've got a job, for goodness sake.
Yes, Lindsay, that's exactly how AfriForum Youth feels about it. We surely feel that the government would like to see more people graduate from the universities and colleges from South Africa, and we feel that the idea or incentive like this will actually discourage that. And according to the census of 2011, it showed that 11.8% of the population has a tertiary education qualification in South Africa. So a graduate tax would mean that percentage might drop even further. Another thing that we feel is that it's discriminative, because just because you are a graduate, it doesn't necessarily mean that you earn more than the guy who didn't went to university. Say, for instance, there are 2 people who earn 30,000 Rand a month. The one is a graduate and the other one not. Why does the one who went through years of studying, a lot of expenses, why is he the one who ends up with less money at the end of the day?
Yep, we've got that. One of the negative implications filtering through, the fact that it will discourage students from entering tertiary level education in the first place. Warren, on the other hand, you've also got the other worry that's cropped up, and that this will contribute to the skills deficit in the country, that once a student has graduated, once it's used South Africa's resources, the tax would eventually see him or her leave the country.
Yes, Alicia, I think that's true. I think anybody that is subject to this tax, why would they stay in South Africa and work and be subjected to additional tax? Let's not forget that these people are already paying tax. So if this is somebody that goes through, maybe earns R1 million a year, they're paying tax at 40%. Now you want to add tax. Why not just climb on a plane, fly overseas, and go to somewhere that is actually going to encourage them to add to their local community or add to the country's wealth, and not subject these guys to tax?
One of the arguments, though, is that you'll be, as a graduate, you might not be paying an income tax in the first place. So, if you're a recent graduate, you could save on that front, and therefore this wouldn't hit you as hard. Is that a valid argument?
I think, unfortunately, if we look back at, let's say, a United Kingdom model that has sort of been proposed, they're talking about a 20-year model of between 0.5% and 2.5% on your annual taxes. For 20 years, I think at some stage in there, you're going to be in a tax-paying position. So what I think is going to happen is you're going to start finding people structuring their affairs. Why would I work for a boss that's going to tax me an additional tax? Why don't I use a personal services company, for example? Or I put all my assets through a trust, and we start to get into funny tax structures so that I can avoid a 2% or a 1% additional tax that other people actually have to pay in my stead.
Dani, you must have engaged with people with the youth through AfriForum Youth about this. I mean, all you have to do is look at the United Kingdom and look at the highly indebted students that are leaving tertiary education. Number one, they often can't get a job in the UK because of the parlous state of the UK economy at the moment. Number two, if they can get a job, they're gonna use those years of earning money to pay off the debts that they've incurred in the 2, 3, 4 years of education. So we should really look at the UK, I think, and say it hasn't worked there, so it's not going to work here.
Yes, that's true. We know that the government aims to get free education to South Africans by 2014, and we're scared that this graduate tax, they want to bolster the NFSAS fund that gives bursary and loans to South African students studying. We think that it's not a matter of asking more money. We think it's a matter of managing that. NFSAS should simply do what all other bursary and loans company in South Africa does. They should ask the money from the people that they give it to. We already pay progressive income tax, why should we pay graduate tax and then repay our own loans, study loans, and also ensure that someone else can study as well? Then we pay double the loan and only one goes to ourselves.
Of course, we've had the student body SASCO opposed to the ANC proposal, Warren, because it embraces the notion that higher education was a private gain for students as well. And that is a notion that needs to be dismissed right at the front.
Yes, agreed. I think it's not something that most countries have tried to move to a tertiary model where they try and give as much education as possible. However, it's still something that there is only a certain amount of market that can actually accept graduates. I think we should be focusing more on creating jobs that employ these graduates rather than pumping out as many graduates as what we possibly can. We've also got to avoid a scenario where it becomes lucrative to study part of your degree and then go overseas. And in this way, the government doesn't get any money back because theoretically, if you had a 4-year degree and after 3 years you pull out and you just do 1 year overseas, you have 1 year of debt to pay back because the government's paid your degree on your behalf. To me, that's a ludicrous situation that we could sort of find ourselves in, and one that we're not actually contributing to the country's growth.
Well, just staying with you for a moment, don't you think, though, that this is just some lobby group, someone who stood up at Mango and wanted to make a name for him or herself and say, this is what we think we should do. It gets noted down, it gets put forward, and of course it's going to be forgotten. Tell me it's going to be forgotten.
Lindsay, I have to agree with you. One of the guys that sat with me on another similar panel interview, he actually was at the Mangoing conference. And he remarked that there was sort of 1 or 2 days of discussion on the free education and a very, very short discussion at the end saying, oh, how do we actually pay for this? And there were 1 or 2 ideas thrown around and the conference sort of came to an end. So you had a situation that I think everybody agrees that we have to look at an education model. How do we take it forward? We've started getting the primary education into place. Now we're looking at the tertiary education side. Fantastic, but we can't just look at a financing model and say, great, this is just going to be accepted, this is just going to be something that in a 1-year period comes to light. Will it be forgotten? Unfortunately, I don't see it getting forgotten. I do see it getting deferred. I think let's look at things like NHI. We've been talking about this for the last 5 or 6 years. It was going to come in 2013. It's now been deferred another year. The Reserve Bank and the governor are going to be looking at taxes at the end of this year. So I think they need to relook at the whole tax funding system. I think if you look at our tax pool, about 20-25% already goes to education. That's a significant sum of money. So will a 1% change in the tax rate actually give the amount of money to provide free tertiary education? No, definitely not. I think at the moment we have about 900,000 people enrolled in tertiary education. Free education, I don't see it happening in the short term. I think something needs to be put in place. I mean, we've put in the National Development Plan that goes until the year 2020 and beyond. This should actually be something that's encompassed in that document. Let's look 5 years and onwards.